Hello and welcome. I'm Mariam, co-founder and CEO of Babbly. Today, I'm bringing you another episode of interviews where I speak to experts from the world of child development and ask them questions that I struggle to find straightforward answers to as a first-time parent.
Eden, thank you so much for doing this. I'm really excited to have you as an educator, as someone who's been practicing, ECE, if that's the right word, to umbrella word. But I'll let you to introduce yourself and we'll go from there.
Okay. So my name is Eden Pollock. I'm a teacher with York Region District School Board. I am 6 years, well, actually, this will be my 7th year into my teaching career, and it will be my 4th year entering in the kindergarten program. Before I taught kindergarten, I was a grade 1 and 2 teacher. So moving into kindergarten was definitely a move for me. It was definitely different. I was very nervous about it. There was a whole new realm of education I needed to have getting into it. But now that I'm there, I never want to leave. I love it. It's a wonderful time in the families and children's lives, and to be part of it and to have these kids for 2 years and watch them develop from the time that they're 3 turning 4 until they're 5 turning 6 is just a really beautiful thing that I get to do. So I love doing it, and that's why I'm happy to be here and talk to you about the program.
Awesome. Thank you. So maybe let's get started by telling us what are some of the important speech and language related milestones or skills that you see with that age. Like if you were going to describe JK and SK and the hallmarks of those years in terms of communication and social skills, what would those be?
Okay, so speech and language are very important from the time the kids are born until they reach my class, because their experience with others is very limited. So they might have attended a daycare. They might have been staying at home with a caregiver or a parent. They might have come from a different country and have never spoken English before. So when they come into kindergarten, social language really starts to develop. Especially in children who are English language learners. And if a child is an only child as well, language is definitely a different experience for them in the development of their language. So for instance, I've had kids who come in with very limited language and can communicate using very few words. And I've had kids come in who have 2 older siblings and they're fully articulating their thoughts and their feelings and can have a full out conversation with others. But one thing that is consistent is that by the end of SK, when the kids leave my class after the 2 years of being with me, they are definitely communicating thoughts, feelings, ideas, much more articulating and asking questions and so on with a much higher degree of linguistic skills than they did when they came in. So I think a big part of the language and speech is creating that social environment allows the kids to explore with speech. Also, it's really during these early years that we identify issues with speech that might require speech services or occupational therapy or any other concerns that we may have are often addressed at that early stage. So early intervention is the most successful, but also giving kids the opportunity to develop their social language by exposing them to other kids and putting them into interactive situations where they have to speak to each other. Those are very important skills that they develop in the kindergarten level.
That's really interesting. So you're seeing kids coming from, if they're the only child in some cases, probably haven't hung out with anyone but adults for most of their life. And then by the time they leave SK, it sounds like you see a lot of improvement. Maybe not everybody's at the same level, but compared to when they started JK.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. They're never at the same level because, like I was saying, their experiences are so different. And you'll have kids who come in they're speaking as if they're in grade 1 already, and kids coming in with limited words. I mean, even as adults, if we think about the sharing language that we use, even when we're passing something across the table to another person or sharing something with a friend, the language that we use, it changes how we communicate and it changes how we come across to others. And learning how to use that language effectively starts in kindergarten.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned, sometimes kids come into JK with limited words or, limited vocabulary. What are some of the other, I would say, things that you have noticed in your, years of being a teacher that when you see it in the first couple months, you think maybe you need to speak to the parents, or, you feel like that child might need more support?
That's a great question. I have seen cases where kids have very severe speech issues like stuttering, or it sounds like there are marbles in their mouth. They call that marble mouth, even though I don't love that term. It is the term that even speech pathologists might use to communicate the way the language sounds. I've worked with kids whose underbite just cause speech delays. So those would be on the level of requiring speech therapy. And if I had students coming in who were speaking, but they were first language, English language, I'd be able to identify that, you know what, let's ask somebody about this. I'm a big asker. So we have access in the public school board to OTs and speech language people who will come in and do an assessment of the child. Oftentimes I find it's the teachers who go to the parents to say, you know what, this is worth investigating. Because, the parents don't have the luxury of being in a classroom with 20 kids who are their child's age and seeing the differences in language and how language is developing. So as the professional, I've definitely had kids who've come in with a severe stutter. Sometimes in JK, they don't like to do anything. They like to give them a little more time. And then in SK, that's when we pounce on the opportunity to intervene. But I've also worked with children who have autism. And that is more closely related to the occupational therapy side of things. So in this case, we might have to assess the needs of the child more often, and using things like flip books or visual cues might be great ways for the kids to develop their language. I have a student that I've had experience with who the picture cards, I wear it around my neck, and every time they need something, I show them the picture, I point, I try to get them to repeat at least one word in the sentence if they can. And to be honest, I find that with those kids, I see so much success. Because the parents are so on board with me and we work together as a team to get them there. So I've seen lots of different types of struggles. I've seen struggles that are really cured, I'm going to call it, with speech and language pathology. I've seen kids who do well with OT. I've seen kids who grow out of it just naturally. So it really is on a case-to-case basis. And I think the important thing is early intervention and just making sure that you ask the right questions and not be afraid to ask people for help.
Yeah, so that's interesting when you mention that, you collect information in the first few months or weeks as a new child comes to your class. I've also heard cases where parents go to the teacher with like a full binder of information and historical data. Mm-hmm. And then what they hear from the teacher or the principal is, this is great, but we still need to get to know your child. I'm wondering as a teacher, like, what's that balance between what would you like the parents to tell you, but where is that point where you're like, I have enough information from the parents, I now need to spend more time with the child and collect more information? Right.
So that's a great question, because especially in JK, we have no previous history of these kids, right? Sometimes in older grades, there's an OSR file if they're coming from another school. There's other teachers we can speak to. JK, where it's a clean slate, it's a fresh start. So we're getting brand new families to the school. There's no OSR file or previous academic records in most cases, unless there is a pre-existing issue, such as a diagnosis of some sort, or we often have little to no knowledge who's coming into our class and what that student's needs are. We find that the only way to really get information is by communicating with families and getting to know the kids. So like you had said, some parents provide binders and files of information. I personally love when I see a binder from a parent. It shows that they want to work with me. It shows that they've done their research. Not every child requires a binder, of course. Some kids, they're coming in and they're at status quo development. But again, with one of my students who has autism, his mother has done so much research and work. And I have this big green binder full of things that tell me, introducing me to him. Like, my name is, I have this many people in my family. I have this many brothers, this many sisters. These are the things that trigger me. These are the things that help me when I get too excited. These are the things that help me calm down. And those are really great starters. But like you had said, nothing really replaces getting to know the child. So some families are really reluctant to share information because they feel that they have to protect their kids. They're worried that the news will get out that their kid has a difference or has a different type way of learning. And I just want to like tell parents that, you know, in some cases, families have had negative experiences, either socially or within their culture, where sharing information, like an autism diagnosis, for example, comes across as negative. And somehow that will have consequences for their child. That's the feeling. If there's one thing I would like all families to know, it's that the more we know about your child, the better care we can provide for them and the higher self-esteem they'll have. So if, you know, behaviors might look different based on the needs of the child and the recommendations from their doctor or service providers, and the more we can do for that child in terms of developing their skills and making adjustments to their program, then the more self-esteem they'll have, because they'll feel like, you know what, my needs are being taken care of. And what do we all know? Kids need to feel secure, they need to feel loved, and they need to feel accepted in order to be happy. So the more information parents can give to the teachers, if they have noteworthy information, then the better it would be.
That's good to know. So let's just switch for a second. What kind of skills do you wish every child had when they first come to JK? On the first day that they're starting JK, what do you wish all of them has?
I mean, this is always a tough question to answer, because all the kids are so different, and there really would never be a fair expectation for all kids to enter with the same skills or with one skill in particular. However, because you're asking me, I think that it's really helpful when the kids come in knowing the alphabet and the sounds of the letters, especially the ones in their name. So even if they come in and they don't know the alphabet off by heart, but they know the sounds of the letters of their name, it's just some foundation to build upon. Coming in with nothing is really difficult, because there's so many things going on in that child's mind when they come into that school. Social stuff, new teacher, new environment. To have a basis in which to grow and which to stand upon is very helpful. Even being able to roughly write their name, even if it's not in order, like even if the letters are there, but the order is incorrect or the writing isn't neat. We don't expect kids' writing to be neat or perfect at all at that age. And knowing the first and last letter of their name is written correctly, that's really helpful. And being able to count to 10 is really helpful too. So very like basic things, like a lot of parents get really stressed out and push their kids to know way more than they need to know on the first day of JK. I've had kids come in who are fully reading because it was something that was important to their parents, and they practiced that, and that was something they were skilled at. And that's wonderful. If that's a natural growth for your child, I would never say hold someone back, but I would say also we don't want to push and we don't want to stress kids out before a new experience like the first year of JK. So really counting to 10, knowing how to spell their name knowing the first letter of their name and as many letters as they can sound out is really helpful, but not mandatory at all, but just helpful.
Great. So it sounds like, those are great foundations for literacy. If they know the alphabet, if they're familiar with their letters of their names.
Right.
What other soft skills or, maybe like critical thinking? Is there critical thinking for a 4-year-old? Like, what are those skills like?
Actually, you know what? You'd be surprised, but critical thinking is actually a skill that starts as young as 6 months old. I know, it's kind of crazy, right? And it's actually something that's practiced and developed well until adult life. I still practice my critical thinking skills now. So a child at 6 months actually starts exploring the world around them. They pick up things, they examine them, they put things in their mouth, all that fun stuff that, kind of scares parents at that age. But what I often see, though, is parents rush to protect their kids. So instead of learning to touch and examine things, kids often learn at a very early age to stay away from things that require them to explore. And actually that really hinders critical thinking development. And I know 6 months sounds really young, and it is, but they do start picking up on those, don't go there, don't touch that, don't put that in your mouth. Like those are things that they start to understand that at a young age, even if they don't understand language. They understand actions, tone of voice. When they're in kindergarten, everything becomes inquiry. So everything we do requires some level of critical thinking. So you often hear kids asking for help to open their snacks, for example. In my classroom, one way that I develop critical thinking is by responding to that question with like, how can we solve that problem on our own? how can you open that snack on your own? What are some things you can do? And there are child-safe scissors in the classroom all the time. And they're always available to them. So, my goal is really just for them to figure out how to open that snack using the scissors on their own accord, rather than running to me to ask me to do it for them. And they do this, though, because at home, it's often easier to just do for the kids. So the kids, their reaction is immediately to ask for help, as opposed to find the scissors on their own and open it on their own. And that's typically because parents are busy, right? They have jobs. They might have other kids at home. They're rushing. It's hard to spend the time instilling critical thinking, and it does take time, Sometimes it takes like 5 to 10 minutes for them to figure out what to do. And it's a grueling process, because you just want to be like, oh, I could just do this in 2 seconds for them. But once they do it one time, they now know how to open that snack on their own. So the point of critical thinking is really to get the kids to develop problem-solving strategies on their own. And I've seen it. I had a student in my class who for 10 minutes, I watched him walk around the room holding his snack and deciding how he should open it. He tried using the corner of a table and sawing it like that. He tried using like a crayon to jab at it. And finally he came to the scissors. And in my mind, I'm like, look at the critical thinking he's developed in that moment. And at home, like if I was his parent, I might have just been like, oh, just give it to me, tear it open. But they don't learn anything that way. So as soon as our kids are able to do anything for themselves, we really want to encourage them to try problem solving on their own, even though it's a grueling and time consuming thing to do. Sometimes we understand you just don't have the time, but if you do have the time and you can make that time, always asking the question, how can you solve that problem on your own, is a great way to sort of prompt a child that they're on their own for this one.
I was smiling the whole time, because I'm definitely guilty of wanting to do things quickly, especially, when we're trying to get out of the door. But you're absolutely right. Like spending that time to help a child put their shoes on, for instance, pays off later, even though it's really painful in the beginning.
Exactly. Like I've had kids who we sit there all recess long, and it's awful, because that they're trying, and you just praise them along the way. They never feel bad about it, because along the way, there's little successes here and there. You got your shoe on by yourself. That's wonderful. Now we're going to fold over the strap. And the first time I kind of showed them how to do it, and they're doing it on their own. And then after that, it's amazing how resilient kids are. They learn something. They're like little sponges. And now they just know forever. After that child found those scissors, I never once again was asked to open a snack for him. He just knew what to do. So putting a little trust into the kids, I think, is so important.
How do you feel about, how things are going to be different, and especially because a lot of parents don't know what September is going to look like? What can they do between now and then? Either that, like what can they do to prepare their child for potentially like a hybrid of online, in person, or maybe we can talk about some of the challenges that you see in the pandemic, type of JK framework.
Right.
About that. Or what do you think is a good relevant question that parents want to know?
They probably want to know how they can support their kids during COVID, because there's a whole social aspect here that's gone missing for these kids. And at that age, it's such a crucial thing, and it's something they're used to and know. And they were just like pulled from school and all their friends, and taking care of their mental health is such an important part of this whole COVID thing. I mean, the academics will come. There's never a child who goes to who like misses a year of kindergarten and then never goes to university again. Like they'll learn, they'll get there. I think really the social piece is so important. Getting your kids to socialize with kids at a safe distance, if that's what you need to do, or if you're bubbling with another family and the kids are able to play together, exposing them to that would be a wonderful thing, and teaching them through play. I don't know what September is going to look like. And to be honest, I would love for someone to answer that question for me as well. Like, what's my classroom going to look like? How am I going to manage little children at that age without being able to hug and to, socialize with them? Like, how am I going to get them to sit on a carpet and learn a lesson and then not go and play? I don't know how that's going to work. I know that it's a stressor for everyone right now, teachers and parents and administrators alike. So I can only hope that our online learning, if it does come to that, now that we've had some experience with it, we'll now know what to do and be better prepared for that piece. I think that as much as parents can, like getting groups of kids together, even during the learning, if we do online learning, getting them together to learn together would be wonderful. If there's a backyard, or even, like I said, if you're bubbling and you're comfortable bringing the kids into your home, like 3 or 4 of them together, then that would be a great solution. I just don't know what the rules are going to be, and they seem to be changing all the time. So that causes a lot of stress in all of us, I think.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, my son is starting JK in September, so
Right.
we're trying to figure out how, and as the only child, that social element and social development is definitely something that I think he's missing.
Right.
Okay, so I think we went through a lot of questions. Maybe one final, thought for me as a parent, something I think about is, there are all these literacy skills and reading and writing and, math, and now maybe coding, which I know post-COVID, a lot of parents are paying premium prices for coding school because they see technology as the future of, jobs and education. But on the flip side, I think there was a report from United Nations that empathy was the most important skill for the 21st century. How do you think our education system can support developing those critical skills, and are we doing enough?
That's such a great question. I have always strongly believed in teaching students to think globally, global mindedness. It's such a big theme in my program personally, and I have tons of educator friends who agree. And it does start as early as kindergarten, and actually showing empathy is on the 4 frames. It's one of the expectations that we look for in the kids. I actually always say I wish that more grades were like kindergarten, because it's such a holistic approach to teaching. We do consider global mindedness, we consider empathy, social skills. Those are the things that we're like sort of really teaching them more than I would even say numbers and reading and writing, because even though those skills are important, they will learn those skills through osmosis. But I find that things like empathy and, thinking about the global community are things that do need to be taught a lot of the time, especially in today's day and age, like you were saying, with technology being such a big part of their life. It's a lot of non-face-to-face experiences that the kids are having, especially as they get older. They're all hiding behind a phone. And it's really easy to, bully somebody, or it's really easy to say something mean to someone when you don't have to look them in the eye. And the reason we learned empathy is because at some point we were probably mean to somebody once, saw the expression on their face, saw how it made them feel, and that hurt our heart. And that made us feel something, and that thing was empathy. Kids today, as they get older, they're removed from that more. They don't have as much of that face-to-face opportunity to say, oh, my words are hurting this person. Oh, what I did would upset that person. And it's really easy to like write things and troll online and not have to see or face any consequences. And that's sort of the reality that the kids are living in these days, with the technology being such a central part. So I think it's really important. So for instance, I always like to sponsor a child in my class. And so what we do is we have a pen pal. We had a girl named Samara who is from Mozambique. And we actually wrote her letters last year. I called Plan Canada. I said, I teach kindergarten. We want a pen pal. I want these kids to see that, they go to the tap and turn on the water. There are children in different countries who don't have that luxury. And we learned all about how she gets water and how she has to travel miles and miles away from her family to get it. And these kids had empathy. Like they couldn't believe it. And then they started saying things like, guys, we have to make sure the water is turned off because some people in different parts of the world don't have water. Or we need to recycle. You have to put it in the right bin, because if you don't put it in the right bin, the trees are going to fall down, because, they're kids and that's how they think. The trees are going to fall down. To me, including as much education I can about the different cultures in our community, the different cultures around the world, the way different people live, pointing out how lucky we are to live in a country where we have access to free healthcare and education and water. These are things I talk about with these kids. And at the ripe age of 5 years old, they're really able to see that. I would argue even more than even some adults can, because they feel so much. And I always say, this is a big thing for me. When kids are little, they think about fairness. They care about what's fair. If someone else has a toy and they want it too, they need to have the same amount of time with that toy. But as we get older and become adults, we care about being right. We forget about being fair, and we care about what's right. I'm right, you're wrong. That's sort of how we become. And to me, it's such a beautiful thing if we can hold on to that fairness piece for as long as possible. And that's how I try to run my classroom, a place that fairness comes first, equity and inclusivity come first. It's not about right and wrong all the time. Sometimes it's about you've made someone feel a certain way. We have to help a friend. And so I do try and run my class like that. And I think that if more teachers and educators and parents got their kids involved in a charity or doing volunteer work or exposing them to something that makes them a little uncomfortable, just a little uncomfortable, so that they can learn how to think of others and how to, put themselves in somebody else's shoes, I think these kids will be raised in a beautiful world where they can actually make a change and make a difference in their life.
As you were speaking, I was thinking those kids are really lucky to be in your class. And how can we scale that? Like, how can every child that goes into JK have the opportunity to sponsor a child, learn about, that global mindedness? And I was thinking if we can, scratch this, I'm hoping we're scratching the surface on that with Babbly, but if we could help facilitate, scaling that, I think we would be in a better place.
I agree with you. And thank you. That's such a compliment. And believe me, I feel very lucky too. I have such wonderful students and families, and the relationship with the parents, it's such an important part of this whole process. If I didn't have the relationship I had with the parents, then my heart wouldn't be as in it. It's like you really develop a love. I feel like I'm part of their family. Like, I don't just feel like I'm their teacher. I feel like I'm in their home, like virtually. And that's a wonderful way to feel. And if there's honestly one more thing I could just add in that I would love for parents to know is about their rights as a parent and advocacy. A lot of people, especially people who come to the country who are new, they don't know what their rights are as a parent. And if you have a child who has any special needs, any differences, or if you have any concerns, you have the right to services, you have the right to information. And I think that parents really need to learn how to advocate for their kids more, because the school system's not going to do it. Not every day you're going to get a teacher who's as invested as others. You have to be lucky. And as much as I'd like to say my colleagues that I've had experiences with are amazing at advocating for their students, it's a completely different story when the parents come in. And I actually learned that from my own mother. I struggled in school growing up. I had learning disabilities. And my mom was best friends with the principal. She was in that school almost every day, saying, well, I know she's entitled to extra time, and I know she's entitled to this. She did her research. And I know not every parent has the time to do that. It is time consuming. But even if you can join parent council and, go to a parent council meeting once a month in the evening after work, if that's something that fits into your schedule, bringing yourself into the school and being a face and a name that's known, that's how you get help for your kid. That's how you can really see what you're entitled to. So that's a really big thing that I stress to parents, especially newcomers who might have a completely different experience of education in their home country, or who are frightened even at the prospect of, talking to the principal. I had one parent who was really scared to meet with the principal because where she comes from, that was like a very serious thing. But here the principals are a little more casual and they're more approachable, and I want parents to know that they have rights and they have advocacy that they can advocate for their kids.
Yeah, especially now what I hear is a lot of parents are worried about their child starting JK if they have any kind of speech and language delay. And their biggest fear is, their child not being supported, not having friends, not being able to ask for help.
Yeah.
So, what I'm hearing you say is by knowing about your rights, by being an advocate for your child, not only I think that initial anxiety will be removed because the situation that your child is going to be thrown into, but you also make sure that you have enough resources and support for your child, so they won't just fall off a cliff.
Absolutely.
Great. It was really nice talking to you. Thank you again.
So nice talking to you. Thank you for having me and letting me, talk about this topic. I'm very passionate about it. And so any opportunity I have to contribute to the education community and to parents and families, it's a pleasure for me, really. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Eden.